With the Quincy Sternritter finally coming to Bleach Brave Souls in the near future, I wanted to start a series where I take each Sternritter and attempt to predict their stats, skills, and their overall moveset. We've done it before with Askin Naklavar, Sternritter D, the death dealing, and you guys seem to really like what we did. So now it's time to look at the Master of Fear himself, Asnot. Before we begin, however guys, just a couple of housekeeping points. Please hit subscribe and support the channel if you like what we're doing here. There's Bleach videos every week and I'd really appreciate the support. I really appreciated the response to the Askin video. I think it just seemed to go down really well. And so, I'd love you guys to get involved. Let me know what Sternritter you would like to see us do next. Whichever Sternritter gets the most votes will be the one that gets a video next. Obviously we want to get around to all the Sternritters eventually, but it would just be really cool to get some input and see who you want doing next. And just the last bit before we begin, I did have help once again by my good friend S. Karasa, and this time he's even gone a step further and created us a full cheat sheet for Asnot as a character in Bleach Brave Souls, which I'm going to stick up on the screen. Now, you can see there his stats and his skills, and let's just get into it. So Asnot was a weird one for me. Unlike Askin, he doesn't have a whole kind of set of abilities that make it really interesting to decide on his essays. As is basically he does what he says on the tin character. He says that he will give you incredible amounts of fear, and that's about the limit of his abilities. That's not to say, however, that we can't turn him into a cool Bleach Brave Souls character. As you can see on the cheat sheet, he's an SP character with a powerful SP of 792, and his moves will obviously reflect that as well, and his stats and skills are all there for you to see. Moving on to his NAD, again being a Quincy, I think Az is going to be a ranged character. He doesn't have a bow and arrow like Askin, but he does have his Reishi Thorns, which I imagine will be his basic move. I don't necessarily know if they will inflict any ailments, but an ailment, that's something that was, again, something we had to decide on with Asnot. But I do think that he will basically throw the thorns forward, and it'll be a pretty standard NAD, to be honest. So moving on to his essays then, and I want to just get this out of the way, we had to deliberate a bit as to what ailment to give Asnot, because the fear, honestly, could kind of work in a couple of different ways. It came down to between weakening and paralysis, and in the end we went with paralysis because it made the most sense to the canon manga. In both battles that Asnot has in Bleach, he manages to completely paralyze his opponents through fear. Byakuya gets paralyzed and then Az lands a big hit on him, and then when Az activates his Volsendig Tartar Foras, Rukia also gets paralyzed to the ground. So to me, while I think weakening would also work with this character, we went with paralysis in the end, and I think that makes the most sense. His SA1 then, I think he will utilise his thorns, and I think it'll be similar to Power Kayen's SA1. In the beginning of the fight with Rukia, Az summons a ring of thorns around himself and then begins firing them at her. I think that he will do that for his SA1, that he'll basically summon the ring and then throw them forwards, again, akin to Power Kayen. I don't think that ring of thorns will be around him all the time, although admittedly that would be really cool. I think his basic NAD, he'll just summon the thorns kind of one by one, and then his SA1, he'll summon the ring and then shoot them forwards. So that, to me, pretty simple SA1. Now his SA2 is kind of interesting, and this is where he starts using the fear. It's very similar to Can't For Your Own World Loopy's SA2. Basically, Az will create like a fear trap in front of him, which will pull enemies in towards him and then damage them heavily. For his visuals, I think we'll be using the black sludge that we see in the battle against Rukia. When Az's thorns connect with something, the fear is dispersed as an actual substance. It's that kind of tar-like black ooze, and I think that will be in the centre of this trap in the middle here. Obviously, all of these essays as well have the ability to inflict paralysis, and I think, yeah, so the second move will be similar to Loopy's from Can't For Your Own World, and it'll pull people in, kind of trap them in the fear, and then damage them. SA3, again, is pretty simple, and this will be the basic fear ability. It will be a full screen, but it will be a charge attack. And as you can see, Asnot has Havoc on this cheat sheet. So that means his strong attacks have extra range. So I think normally this attack probably won't be a full screen, but the charging of it will make it full screen, and then even beyond that. As for his visuals, I'm not entirely sure what to do, because this will be his primary fear ability. I personally would love to see some kind of visualization based on the imagery that we got in the manga. So I don't think you can necessarily have a zombie Rukia flash up, because that won't apply to every character. Every character's not Byakuya. But I do think you could potentially have the insects swarm the screen like they do when they cover Byakuya's body in his mind. And I think that That would make for a really cool full screen ability. It's just having the place filled with bugs and just generally be really creepy looking. And obviously that would do an awful lot of damage if it hits you, especially when it's fully charged. Now, unlike Askin, like I said before, Asnot doesn't have this whole litany of abilities, so I don't think he will have a transformative ultimate. I think it's more likely he will use his ultimate and it will be his Volstendig Tartar Foras, and I don't think he will use it after that, however, as much as I would like him to, because his Volstendig's probably the coolest looking in the series. So I think as his ultimate will basically play out exactly like it does in the manga. I think the animation will start with his eye rolling back, you'll see the cross in his eye, then there'll be a big transformation. We'll get that cool pose that he does when he goes into Tartar Foras. He'll then land on the ground as he does when he lands behind Rukia, and then there will probably be some kind of animation, and that will probably be how his ultimate plays out. Now you might be wondering, what about as his second form, the kind of grotesque abomination that he transforms into at the very end of the fight? And it's difficult because I could absolutely see this being involved in his moveset, but it does nothing at all. We have absolutely no idea what this thing does. Now admittedly that isn't necessarily enough to stop K-Lab from using it. I could honestly see his SA3 involving his Volstendig, and then his ultimate being that transformation into his second form, and then when he becomes his second form, there's just like a big fear animation, and that's the damage. So I could see that honestly going either way. If they really want to cover every facet of this character's on-screen moveset, then that secondary form will be in there somewhere. It just depends how they decide to approach that. There is also the question of Senbon Zakura as well. Will Asnot use Byakuya's Bankai in any of his moves? And I don't think he will. There's possible that they could do a second version of this character where he uses Byakuya's Bankai in his attacks. I don't think that that's the one we'll get initially. I do think, I would honestly put money on Asnot being one of the first Sternritters to arrive. I think he'll probably be in the first Sternritter banner. Not only is he very popular, he was also one of the first Sternritters to really appear in this arc and make a big impression. So I think there's a great chance of Az being one of the first Sternritters we see. But I think it's more likely that they will try and differentiate him and give him his own moves as opposed to using Senbon Zakura, even though during this point in the story he is using Byakuya's Bankai. So it's totally up in the air. It could go anywhere. But the moveset we've created for Az here is based on his fear abilities. And that's kind of that's honestly what I would rather see, because that's his own attacks as opposed to using Byakuya's Bankai. So yeah, who knows really. I think just for fun, I think if they did use Byakuya's Bankai, his ultimate would be him jumping in the air, pulling the medallion across his face like that, and then we'd probably get the ring around his head like he does when he knocks out Byakuya the first time. I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for our character breakdown of Asnot in Bleach Brave Souls. I think his quote is going to be the one about fear that he says to Byakuya. I know that Brave Souls does allow some long quotes, but it won't be the whole spiel. I think it's more likely to be the one, as you can see on the sheet, that talks about true fear being without reason, without bounds, like a swarm of insects crawling up the body, we cannot escape our instincts. That was like the big Asnot quote that he said when he defeated Byakuya, or, you know, pretty much the defining moment of that fight, when you realised actually Byakuya might lose here. So I think that's probably going to be Asnot's quote. I think it's immediately recognisable. I think it makes a lot of sense for it to be that one. It could be something from the Rukia fight, but I don't think anything he said in that fight was quite as memorable. You know, it was more a riff on the fear stuff that he said before, but I think it was definitely more memorable in the Byakuya fight. So that's what my bet would be for his summoning quote. And that's pretty much it for our Bleach Brave Souls moveset prediction for Sternritter F the Fear Asnot. Personally, I cannot wait to see this character in the game. He's my second favourite Sternritter behind Askin, and I just can't wait to get the Quincy's in the game. I think it'd be so cool. Let me know in the comments below, guys, what do you think of our moveset? Is there anything you'd do differently for Az's moves? Any of the essays that you would change or give him something else? Do you think they'll do a version with Byakuya's Bankai? I'd love to know. And like I said, please tell me what Sternritter you would like to see next. Whether that's Basby, whether that's Giselle, or whether that's one of the lesser known Sternritters. I don't mind. Anything, I'd love to do another video. Just let me know in the comments below. But until next time, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. So I will see you next time. Goodbye.